The world watched with bated breath as Johannesburg prepared to host a historic global summit. A city steeped in history, culture, and resilience now became the stage for an unprecedented gathering. The G20 Summit, the first ever held on African soil. The stakes were immense. Discussions were set to shape global policies on climate action, economic stability, and sustainable development. But even before the summit began, uncertainty loomed. Unexpected absences and shifting alliances created a ripple of suspense that traveled across the globe. Journalists, diplomats, us, and analysts speculated. Could the summit achieve its ambitious goals amid these unpredictable dynamics? Could cooperation emerge from a scene where surprises and uncertainties loomed at every turn? The 2025 Johannesburg G20 Summit was no ordinary meeting of nations. It was a test of diplomacy, a reflection of emerging global powers, and a story unfolding in real time, a narrative of tension, strategy, and anticipation. To grasp the weight of Johannesburg, we must first understand the G20 itself. The Group of 20, known as the G20, is a forum of the world's largest economies, including advanced economies like the United States, Germany, and Japan, alongside emerging powers such as India, Brazil, and South Africa. Formed in 1999, the G20 was originally designed to foster dialogue and cooperation on global financial stability. Over time, its role expanded to cover trade, climate policy, development, and crisis management. The G20's influence is far-reaching. While its agreements are not legally binding, they shape the global economy, guide investment flows, and influence international policies on development and sustainability. Historically, the G20 has played a central role during crises. During the 2008 financial meltdown, coordinated measures across member nations stabilized global markets. During the COVID-19 pandemic, its policies helped coordinate economic recovery and public health support. Yet, the forum is also a reflection of global tensions and complexity. Balancing the priorities of both advanced and emerging economies is never simple. The Johannesburg Summit, in particular, symbolized a shift, a chance for the Global South to assert its voice on the world stage. For South Africa, hosting the G20 was far more than ceremonial. It was a declaration. The continent was ready to participate in shaping global agendas. The summit's organizers focused on issues with worldwide significance: economic inequality, debt relief, climate adaptation, and sustainable development. Johannesburg's role was both symbolic and strategic, a signal that emerging economies could influence global priorities. To strengthen the summit's agenda, South Africa commissioned research on global wealth inequality, led by Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz. The report highlighted disparities between nations and offered policy solutions to promote equity and sustainable growth. The official theme, solidarity, equality, sustainability, was more than rhetoric. It captured the essence of Johannesburg's ambition to challenge traditional hierarchies and showcase a more inclusive, collaborative vision for the future. As a key member of the BRICS coalition and Africa's most industrialized nation, it positioned itself as a bridge between the Global South and established economic powers, advocating for global cooperation grounded in equity and sustainability. Even before the summit doors opened, tension was palpable. Some member nations announced that their top representatives would not attend, creating uncertainty and speculation. Media outlets, analysts, and diplomats buzzed with curiosity. Could the summit fulfill its ambitious agenda despite these gaps? Would the agreements reached have the influence the world expected? Observers noted that such absences, while not unprecedented, always add complexity to negotiations. The G20 is designed for dialogue and compromise, but the absence of key voices can amplify unpredictability, making every decision more consequential. Dr. Noluthando Fungila, an expert in international relations, described these moments as tests of multilateral resilience. She explained that unexpected developments challenge diplomats to adapt quickly negotiate creatively, and balance competing priorities, all while under the scrutiny of the global media, even without naming specific nations. The drama of the summit was clear. The world was watching to see if cooperation could overcome uncertainty. The G20 Summit is far more than high-profile speeches and photo opportunities. Behind the scenes, a network of ministerial meetings, technical committees, and bilateral negotiations sets the stage for substantive agreements. Johannesburg was no exception. Teams worked tirelessly in rooms behind closed doors, negotiating complex topics such as financial regulation, renewable energy funding, and equitable development programs. The ceremonial aspects of the summit, opening addresses, handover procedures, and press conferences added tension. Every gesture and statement was scrutinized, and the absence of key participants made the proceedings unpredictable. Observers noted a historic undertone for the first time. An African-hosted G20 summit brought issues traditionally overlooked, such as infrastructure development, climate adaptation funding, and debt relief, to the center of global discussions. The drama of the summit was not manufactured. It arose organically from the stakes, the history, and the global gaze. Every negotiation, every compromise, carried weight, and every delay or surprise amplified suspense. Despite uncertainties, the summit focused on three central themes. First, climate and sustainability, with a focus on funding renewable energy initiatives, supporting vulnerable nations, and committing to environmentally responsible economic growth. Second was global economic stability, which involved addressing debt challenges, promoting equitable financial systems, and fostering sustainable growth for emerging economies. And third, economic equity, which aimed to reduce disparities between nations, foster inclusive development, and encourage policies that benefit all sectors of society. The discussions were both technical and dramatic. Observers described tense negotiations, late-night debates, and moments of breakthrough that would shape global agreements. The suspense was real. The world watched to see if consensus could emerge despite unpredictability and shifting participation. Experts provided insight into the summit's significance. Professor Kagazzo, Shai of the University of Limpopo, noted that much of the G20's substantive work occurs in ongoing ministerial meetings, even if key representatives are absent. Agreements negotiated through technical channels still guide global policy. Dr. Fungula emphasized that the Johannesburg Summit showcased the rising influence of emerging economies. Nations from the global south are increasingly shaping policies on climate, development, and financial stability. Global economic observers highlighted that Johannesburg's emphasis on equity and sustainability could influence future summits, redefining priorities and approaches in multilateral diplomacy. The summit demonstrated that drama and suspense can exist without controversy, unpredictability. Negotiation and high stakes are enough to create tension that captivates audiences worldwide. The Johannesburg G20 Summit's impact extended far beyond Africa. It showed that even with unexpected absences, multilateral institutions could function and deliver outcomes. It demonstrated that emerging economies can assert influence and set the agenda on pressing global challenges. The summit's focus on climate adaptation, sustainable development, and economic equity sent a clear message. Global collaboration is essential, and no single nation controls the path forward. For observers, the summit was a moment of suspense, drama, and revelation, proof that global diplomacy is as much about process and strategy as it is about policies. The story of Johannesburg would resonate beyond the summit itself, offering lessons in cooperation, resilience, and the art of navigating uncertainty on a global stage. The story of what happens next, however, is yet to be written. As the Johannesburg G20 Summit began, an undeniable tension filled the air. While the world watched for agreements and declarations, a thread of uncertainty was weaving its way through the entire event. Some of the world's major economies weren't represented by their top leaders, but only at the ministerial level. This raised some serious questions. How would the summit's decisions actually be carried out? Could they even reach a true consensus without all the top powers in the room? Observers call the atmosphere unprecedented, a mix of high anticipation, suspense, and raw curiosity. Every handshake, every negotiation, every late-night discussion held the potential to reshape the global landscape. Even the smallest diplomatic moves became headline news. This summit was more than just a policy forum. It was a story of global power, diplomacy, and intrigue. And you had to watch closely to understand what was truly going on. Diplomacy is almost never a straight line. Behind every agreement, there's a hidden network of negotiations, compromises, and silent influence. Johannesburg was the perfect example of this. Even without all the top leaders physically present, their influence was everywhere. Their known policy directions, financial priorities, and strategic positions were shaping every conversation. Analysts call this shadow diplomacy, where decisions are guided by what people expect, by historical stances, and by unspoken pressure rather than direct confrontation. For instance, even though the US wasn't fully represented, the media and analysts were glued to every subtle clue. Official statements, the actions of their delegation, and even the timing of their communications. Every move was dissected for hints about future policy. This unseen influence created a lot of tension and suspense. Delegates often had to make decisions with incomplete information, trying to guess how the absent voices would react once they were back on the global stage. It was like navigating a maze with some of the key players missing, adding a whole new layer of complexity to the game. Despite all the uncertainty, the summit actually produced some significant results. On climate, new commitments were made to expand renewable energy projects, help vulnerable nations adapt to climate change, and fund global sustainable development. Experts say that while these agreements need serious follow-through, they signal a new, more inclusive approach to global climate action. When it came to debt and financial fairness, several emerging economies were given frameworks for debt relief and restructuring. International financial institutions joined in on technical talks, exploring new ways to balance economic growth with responsible spending. The summit also focused heavily on technology. There was a big push for fair access to tech resources, cooperation on cybersecurity, and building a global digital infrastructure. Delegates were clear: technology must be used to help sustainable development, not make inequality worse. Every one of these agreements was hammered out through intense negotiations, often behind closed doors. Late-night discussions stretched into the early morning as diplomats argued over wording, commitments, and timelines. Every concession, every compromise, and every firm stance had consequences that would reach far beyond Johannesburg. One of the defining features of this summit was the growing influence of emerging economies. Countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America were pushing for priorities that historically didn't get much attention. Observers noted that these nations were demanding policies that addressed climate adaptation, economic fairness, and sustainable infrastructure. Their voices were focused on practical solutions, not just symbolic gestures. Experts like Professor Kagotso Shai pointed out that the summit showed a subtle but important shift in global power. Decisions were no longer being dominated just by the traditional economic giants. Emerging economies were shaping the conversations, driving new initiatives, and influencing the final declaration. This created its own suspense. Could these nations work together effectively to push for their collective goals? Would their own internal differences water down their influence? The world was watching closely, fascinated by this new chapter in global politics. Diplomatic negotiations often feel like a strategic game, and Johannesburg showed this perfectly. Delegates were constantly balancing their own country's priorities, global expectations, and the unpredictable dynamics created by absences or delayed communications. The informal chats over meals or during quick breaks often ended up shaping the formal outcomes. Even tiny details, a single phrase in the final declaration, a specific position in a press release. Or the order of speakers could signal new alliances, hidden reservations, or influence future talks. The suspense of the summit wasn't about dramatic public statements. It was woven into every subtle interaction, every decision made under the world's watchful eye. The story of Johannesburg became a lesson in diplomacy itself. Power is just as much about timing, strategy, and subtle influence as it is about grand public declarations. It's about the moves you don't see as much as the ones you do. Even though no top U.S. representative was physically there, analysts and the media were buzzing with speculation about the country's indirect influence. Official statements, policy papers, and communications from U.S. institutions were studied carefully to predict how they might respond. Delegates had to consider how these absent voices might react to the summit's decisions later on. This invisible presence added a layer of mystery. The world was watching the summit unfold, but parts of the story were hidden, guided by unseen forces. This quiet tension just goes to show that global diplomacy is never a straight line, a complex web of action, anticipation, and reaction. One observer described the situation as a chessboard with missing pieces. The moves made in Johannesburg might seem final, but their true consequences depended on what would happen beyond the summit's walls. There were several moments during the summit that really cranked up the drama and suspense. Last-minute negotiations on climate funding led to some unexpected alliances. As delegates suddenly found common ground on really controversial technical issues, there was also an intense debate on economic frameworks that pushed discussions late into the night, because every single word in the final declaration carried huge implications. At one point, sudden amendments to draft documents required rapid consensus, testing the skill and patience of every diplomat in the room. For anyone watching, these moments show that global diplomacy is a high-stakes performance. The suspense is built into the process. What seems settled can change in an instant. And what's agreed upon today can have consequences that unfold months or even years down the road. The Johannesburg Summit leaves us with some fascinating questions. How do global decisions affect the lives of billions of people, especially when key players aren't even in the room? Can emerging economies really work together to influence global policy? Or will their internal differences get in the way? How much of diplomacy is visible to the public, and how much of it stays hidden in the realm of strategy and subtle influence? And in a world of interconnected economies and technology, can we really reach a consensus without every major power participating? These questions don't have easy answers, and they invite all of us to think about the hidden layers of global governance, the complexity of negotiation, and the unpredictable nature of international collaboration. Although the Johannesburg G20 Summit ended with a detailed declaration, its real impact will only become clear over time. The agreements signal important priorities like climate adaptation, financial fairness, and sustainable development. But the real test is in the implementation. Success will depend on follow-through, cooperation, and coordination between all nations. The summit also leaves behind a symbolic legacy. It showed that global diplomacy can adapt to unpredictability, that emerging economies can successfully assert their influence, and that even unseen forces like absent representatives, indirect influence, or subtle communications can shape outcomes in powerful ways. Experts predict that the lessons learned here will influence future summits, especially in how global negotiations are handled, how emerging economies make their voices heard, and how the world manages unexpected developments. The Johannesburg Summit was a story of suspense, drama, and mystery, not because of open conflict, but because of the way events unfolded, the strategic decisions that were made, and the unseen dynamics of global diplomacy. The summit reminds us that international relations are incredibly complex. And absence doesn't mean silence. Decisions carry weight far beyond what we can immediately see. Every handshake, every discussion, and every late-night negotiation can send ripples through the global system in unpredictable ways. For all of us watching, Johannesburg offers powerful lessons in strategy, resilience, and the art of global collaboration. It challenges us to think more deeply about power, influence, and the subtle forces that are shaping our world. As we reflect on what happened in Johannesburg, I want you to consider these questions. How much do you think global decisions are influenced by what we do unsee? Could the world function effectively if unexpected events suddenly change the balance of power? And what role should emerging economies play in shaping the future of global governance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which decisions from the summit do you think will have the greatest impact in the coming years? And how do you see global diplomacy evolving in this new age of uncertainty? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.